live Sunday nights. This is the John Whitmer Show on 98.7 and 1330 KNSS.
Well, I think my dog's a Democrat, and it breaks my heart to have to say an ugly thing like that. But there's a big old pile of evidence that all points towards the fact my dog might be a Democrat.
Welcome back to the John Whitmer Show on 98.7 and 1330 KNSS, Wichita's #1 talk radio station. You know, so I was reading recently that the Kelly administration appears to be violating state law by increasing the number of able-bodied adults without dependents receiving food stamps. So we wanted to talk with House Majority Leader Dan Hawkins and kind of get his take on it because, well, frankly, not too many people want to hold the administration accountable. Fortunately, we have our House Majority Leader who's willing to do that. And so, Dan, this is becoming a regular thing, but thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening, John, but I want you to know my dog's not a Democrat.
Well, and neither are ours, fortunately. But I love the song, so I have to play it. And there's a big old pile of evidence, and unfortunately, it's on the second floor in Topeka, and will be for 3 more years. But it's so kind of walk us through this because I remember when we passed the HOPE Act, and for those who aren't aware, that the HOPE Act provides Kansans on welfare a path to find jobs and self-sustainability in a growing economy.
Absolutely.
But appears that the governor doesn't care and doesn't care that it's in law. She just wants to do her own thing and do it her way, basically.
No, that's true, and you're absolutely right. The HOPE Act was voted in, passed by the legislature in 2015, and signed by the governor. We thought it was really a great deal. In fact, it proved to be. We had over the next several years a 70% reduction in those who were on the welfare system and left and got jobs. So it really truly was something that was designed to work. And one of the things that bill had what it did was it required that folks go back to work. But the interesting thing was when we did it, we really did it in a manner, it was worded in a manner to where future administrations, because we knew administrations would change and ideologies would change, but future administrations would not be able to sidestep that requirement. And when we started this year, one of the first things we heard the governor say, and pretty consistently, was that she wanted to roll back all of the work requirements. That's kind of like a red line for her. She doesn't like work requirements. When you hear her talk about Medicaid expansion, she doesn't want them on Medicaid expansion or for Medicaid recipients, period. And so we started watching to see what she might do. And when those memos came out, immediately we started working on it. We'd worked on it for a couple of weeks before we actually sent a letter to the governor. But we finally sent a letter to the governor saying, listen, we're putting you on notice. We know what you've done. We know you're violating the law. The law specifically says that the secretary cannot use any federal waivers or programs to skirt that provision. So we sent her the letter, and that late that afternoon she responded with basically, I don't care. We're going to continue doing what we do. You do what you do. So the next day happened to be the state finance council. So when I had an opportunity, every year they do a certificate of indebtedness, which means they borrow money from agencies within the government to tide them over when tax revenue is not coming in. I made a motion to table that until such time as she came into compliance. Unfortunately, I didn't have the votes to quite make that work, and I knew Actually, when I did it, I knew I wasn't going to get the votes, but it was certainly an opportunity to bring it out to the press, make sure the press understood how important it was for us to support the law, which we feel like she should do. She took the same oath that we did to protect and defend the laws of the state of Kansas and, of course, the federal government. Maybe she doesn't look at it quite the way we do because she's certainly skirting the law now. So it hasn't. We aren't at the end of this. Actually, we've just kind of started. When I wasn't able to use that method to kind of force her to come into compliance, basically the governor said that she really didn't care and she was just going to continue what she was doing. We started looking at other means, and we've had our lawyers of the legislature look at the law. And probably tomorrow I'll receive a further report on that. I do believe that they agree with me. I think that they believe that I have a pretty good standing, and so then we'll just look at the options that they present and see what else we can do.
Well, and I'm sure one option is to go to the Attorney General, but just to back up, and you and I haven't talked about this, so
no.
pardon me and I don't mean to put our friends on the spot here, but State Finance Council is made up of the Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader, the Senate President, the Vice President, right?
No, the Senate President and the Majority Leader.
And the Majority Leader, and then the minority leaders from both chambers and the governor. Now,
and both appropriations chairs.
Both appropriations chairs. Okay,
right.
So you have two minority leaders; those are Democrats, and the governor; those are Democrats, and the others are all Republicans, right?
Yeah, and the only other person to really support me on it was the Speaker. I couldn't get a second on my motion from anybody else. The Speaker seconded it. Actually, we had talked to the two other leaders and thought that they would be on board. And then when I made the motion, they backtracked pretty quick. So
that's just what I wanted to point out was that
yeah.
we have a majority of Republicans on the State Finance Council, and they didn't. Now, I know that that's kind of a bit of brinksmanship that you were playing, but
it was. Yeah.
But then again, that's what Laura Kelly is doing here, and at some point, you have to. It's like with the escalating protests in the Capitol. There have been no consequences all session long for these Medicaid expansion protests. And because there's been no consequences, because she and others haven't actually put the hammer down, these protests keep getting more severe. And I think it's, next session, Lord knows what you guys are going to be up against. And it's the same thing here. Laura Kelly is going to continue to get more brazen in her flippancy with disregard to the other two bodies in the building with her. And I think at some point you're going to have to stand up to her. I'm just a little disappointed that that your colleagues didn't choose to join you on that. So what do you do now? You send it to the Attorney General, or what is the next step?
Well, what's interesting, John, is that a few days ago, actually, I think it was maybe last Thursday or Friday, the Kansas City Star, which is not a piece of paper that supports you and I at all. In fact, they are very critical of what we do and the way we think. Came out and they didn't agree. They don't agree at all with the HOPE Act. They think the HOPE Act is a terrible piece of legislation. They came out and really scolded the governor and said, "Listen, it's a law. If you don't like the law, change the law. But abide by the law." And I was really surprised at that because it just wasn't something I was expecting. So other people have noticed, which I think has to do something too. I mean, literally, the governor has a very powerful position, and she can bow her back and just say she's not going to do something. And if she's breaking the law, then ultimately it's our job to call her on it and to take legal action. So what's the action? It could be file a lawsuit and have to hire an attorney, or it could be that the Attorney General could step in. I think before we do anything, we just have to look at our options and see what options are available to us, and then also meet with the Attorney General and see what his feeling is on it. So you can't really step out there and do anything until you analyze the options that are available to you.
Well, the sad part here is, Laura Kelly, again, let us remind everyone, she campaigned as a compromiser, as someone who would reach across the aisle, as someone who could be bipartisan, who would be a uniter, not a divider. And here we are once again, because she's not getting her way, because you guys are not acting in a way that she thinks she should get, she's flaunting her authority and flaunting existing law in this case just to get the policies that she wants. And that's the sad part here.
Well, and in addition, I think if we don't do anything about it, then she will just continue that stance on other issues. So we have to watch. We have to make sure that everybody's following the statutes, and that's all we're asking. That I thought, I guess maybe a little bit naively, I thought, we all took an oath to uphold the statutes of the state of Kansas. So I figured by bringing it to her attention, sending her a letter saying, listen, you are violating the law. We want you to come into compliance with the law, that she would. Well, that's not the case.
No.
She basically just thumbed her nose at us and said, oh, well.
You are absolutely right, Dan, and I think you're right. I think if we don't hold her accountable, then this is just the first in what I fear will be many of these incidents. So, well, Mr. Leader, thank you again for coming on. Dan, keep fighting a good fight for us, and we're behind you, and you keep doing what you got to do. All right, my friend.
We'll keep working at it.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Dan. When we come back, County Commissioner Jim Howell is going to be with us. So we've got another incident just similar to this. What is it with Democrats? You're listening to the John Whitmer Show on 98.7 and 1330 KNSS.
98.7 and 1330 KNSS. 30 KNSS. 30.